Welcome to ReWild Your Health. My name is Jennifer Terrio. Most likely you know me as Jenny. And if you are here listening to this recording, you have most likely jumped onto the path and you've become a client. And I'm very excited. I want to welcome you, and I appreciate that you are willing to take the time to learn and to optimize your human experience. Let me just tell you a little bit about me. I've been a nurse conventionally in the conventional medical setting for over 25 years. And at the same time, I've had one foot securely in the conventional world and one in the integrative holistic world. And as the years have gone on, especially like at the height of my emergency room career, and I loved my emergency room career. I love taking care of sick people. I love trauma. I love very complicated sick people. But unfortunately, there is, and we do a very, very good job at taking care of you if you fall off your motorcycle going 70 miles an hour on the side of the road. Well, maybe not motorcycle, but long story short, we do a great job in trauma, and we do a great job in acute medicine. What we have failed to do is understand how to optimize the human experience before that. I remember before I even knew what I was getting myself into, I would be in the emergency room and I would know I wanted to get to people before. And initially deep dove into nutrition, thinking, well, if I just change their diet and getting them moving, then we can get them off of my trauma room table or stretcher. So as years went on, I started coaching, deep study, and working with people. I found there's some general laws and things that we can do to really optimize the human experience. So that's my experience. So I would say that I'm an integrative medicine practitioner. I'm a health educator. I'm currently in a program to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And I have a variety of other certificates and educational experience that kind of combine together to create this program. All right, so let me tell you about the program. So when I was originally coaching, what I found was some people just had real basic, like, okay, I just want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to drop my A1C, or I want to reverse my diabetes. That's fine. And some people did really great with the conventional wisdom. And some people did really horrible with conventional wisdom. So then I stepped out of conventional wisdom and really started to understand how the human body worked on a biochemical level and started to teach kind of unorthodox, cutting edge style nutrition. But not everybody was still not getting better, and they were coming to me and they were saying, I'm doing everything right, but nothing's shifting. One particular client looked me straight in the heart and was like, why am I not getting better? So I started doing two things. I started taking people out into the woods, and I started putting people on a massage table and doing energy work and deep breath and deep relaxation. And somewhere, depending on the person and the situation, some people did both, some people did, but the people that weren't getting better, just altering their habits, or getting better on the table, or getting better in the woods. And I intuitively knew that is what we needed, that these people needed. We needed to get outside. We needed to take our shoes off. We needed to move our bodies. We needed sun exposure. We needed the air, the breath, the nervous system regulation. But I didn't understand at that point that's what we were doing. I just knew they would get better when we did the stuff. So I started on an even deeper journey to understand why. Finally, that journey is starting. It's just the tip of the iceberg to understand what it is. But ultimately, what I've found is that our bodies and our minds, hold a deep internal ancient wisdom. This wisdom has a mismatch with the current American lifestyle, with our toxicity and our hustle bustle and our speed, our diet, our both with diet of our food and also the light diet, the light exposure in our world, the technology exposure. And this limits our ability to access this deep internal knowledge. Now, I mean this, yes, with our head, but also the knowledge of our body. Our body is programmed on a deep, deep level to be able to heal itself. And unfortunately, there are some things that we're doing in our current life that obscure this process. And what all we need to do is learn how to get out of the way, how to live our life in a way that's a little bit more aligned with our biology. It's essentially a journey just back, and it's not a return. It's not going backwards. I'm a deep believer in moving forward in evolution and integration. So what Warrior Rewild aims to do is to take our current understanding, what we currently know, and the thing we have to remember, and some people find this hard to swallow, is that has where we are as a species is not as advanced as we tend to think. Like, we don't totally understand the human body and all of the amazing processes in which it does. This has only been more and more evident to me as I continue in my master's program towards being a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Everything is theoretical. Why does this medicine work? Well, the theory is X, Y, and Z. We're always uncovering, we're always learning, and that is the beauty of science. So while at times on the surface, what I'm going to teach you and as we move forward is going to look a little woo, it's going to look a little weird, right? I'm going to ask you to do things like take your shoes off and place your feet on the earth. I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the light environment. I'm going to ask you to take deep breaths and connect with your heart. But I'm also going to show you the science behind every single thing that we do. I like to say that I'm evidence-based, but not evidence-limited. And we'll continue and talk about that more. But no, as we move forward, there is science and evidence, and I'm going to show you and provide you that evidence as we move. Now, some people are just going to want to be like, tell me what to do. And then there's going to be some of you that's going to be like, show me the literature. And if you don't feel like the evidence is being presented to you enough, because I'm trying to balance the two, if you are very, very much data driven, please let me know. And if I'm going too far for you, remember this is a general, right now, when I'm recording, this is very general, but when we're working together, it's very personal, very individual. Everybody's program looks different. So make sure you're communicating to me. Too much data, not enough data. The objectives is to teach you the 4Ds, the F factor, and then how you're going to apply that in your life. Disconnected. We're living a life currently more disconnected than ever in the history of mankind. We are essentially moths being pulled to a lamppost. We're so distracted by things that don't necessarily matter, or maybe they do matter, but we're forgetting how big and how vast this planet is that we live on, and how deeply important our connection, how we've evolved in direct connection with this beautiful planet. And that there's so much more to the story than meets the eye on that superficial material view. This is a picture of the Schumann resonance, which we'll talk about more in. and how we are cyclic and cyclic. So as simple as starting with a 24-hour day cycle, learning to entrain your biological body with the cycles of light and dark are going to be a major component of this program. We're disconnected from her because we are all her. We are ancient biological beings living in a modern world. We got to remember that. This disruption, we are energetic light beings and not in the hocus pocus, like that type of way. I mean, we are literally subatomic particles. Sorry. And when we are disconnected, both from the flow of these subatomic particles and from the light and dark cycles of the day, the 365-day flow of the year, from the seasons, from the latitude in which we exist on, causes dysfunction. Dr. Doug Wallace, has this beautiful theory of why we get sick. It's called the bioenergetic origin of complexity and disease. So what does that mean? It means that the origin of our complexity, the evolution of the human body and the complexity of the human body, as well as our current disease, can be seen through the lens of the essentially the mitochondria, but the flow of energy. And when I mean energy, I'm talking about ATP and also the bioelectrical flow of the body. So Dr. Wallace talks about the organizing power of energy flow and how this led to the complexity of the human being, and then also its decline when there's a disruption in this flow. Energy flow through the body is mediated via the mitochondria. These are symbiotic bacteria. Now, this is a thing that most people don't really know until they start studying the mitochondria. That they're symbiotic bacteria. They're not human. They have their own DNA, separate from our nuclear DNA. It gets passed down through our mothers. This symbiotic bacteria, which sometime during our evolution, we worked together in order to create essentially what we are, but we are millions and trillions of mitochondria throughout our body that are symbiotic bacteria. Their genome encompasses mitochondrial DNA that is different than our nuclear DNA. This talks about this is like I need to get a better slide for this, which I will provide for you eventually. But this is just a good way to look at how the mitochondria is deeply affected by our circadian rhythm. And we're going to talk about why and how. And the flow of that subatomic particles in the body, the protons and the electrons, the photons, flow affects us on a physiological level. This is a 2019 Nobel Prize, the molecular understanding of circadian dysfunction, essentially. And this is just a very quick way to look at all of the body systems. We're going to get more in depth, but just know that the flow of the night and day plays a major part in the flow of the energy at the level of the mitochondria and other intercellular activity. So why does that matter? Essentially, we are a dance of subatomic particles, and our health starts with this flow. This is the foundational factor. It's as simple as this. Health is the body's ability to make, move, store, and utilize energy. We build from here. Discovery, oh, this is just like a reminder, right? So we're talking about subatomic particles. Now we could get super deep into quantum physics or the quantum biology, which is a term you don't often hear. But in an interesting kind of last, I would say 10, 15, maybe 20 years, there's been this opening in the understanding of how science works, where we always kind of thought it was, you know, a progression, and that physics and biology didn't really interact, or at least not our human biology, but that has been significantly debunked. And the physics of the human body is very, very, the subatomic quantum level physics is very important on our biology. I just think that's a beautiful picture. All right, disease. So you have all these 3Ds prior to this, right? So disconnection, dysfunction, and it leads to disease. This is just a general picture of the state of humanity. Now remember that girl that was fighting the saber-toothed tiger earlier. Fortunately, this is what we have evolved to, and what we at the Warrior ReWild program are trying to save you from becoming or turn you back from. All right, so back to the bioenergetics. So this goes back to Wallace. So the bioenergetic perspective on disease provides unifying pathophysiological and genetic mechanism for many of the illnesses that plague the modern human. Because this is what and this goes back to my story of the ER. We're very good at acute disease. We're very good at trauma. We're very good at the big stuff. But what we're lacking, and this is not controversial, right? We suck at the modern diseases. And this is where we are right now. This is the intersection. Like, we have cleaned up and moved forward. We've solved pretty much our the mechanism. So if you get hurt physically, the structure of the human body, right? Like, we know how to fix that. And we know how, if we're getting attacked by microorganisms, we know how to fix that, right? So although you'll find that I am not an anti-vaxxer by any means, but I'm also a vaccine questioner. So I don't take them with blind acceptance. But between some level of vaccines, some level of antibiotics throughout the years, right? And I'm talking, if you go way back, we've solved some of the big, big, big health challenges. And this is where I straddle between conventional and integrative and holistic. I do see that throughout history, if you're looking at the human condition in the evolutionary process, one of the things that brought prolongation of our lifespan is the utilization and the discovery of some vaccines and some antibiotics. Now, we've taken it too far, and we give them to everybody, and we think that's going to solve all of our problems. Instead of, what we need to do now is shift, right? So we've figured out those two pieces, but now what is what's another layer of understanding the human being? And this is coming down to the bioenergetic perspective. And when you're looking at it through this lens, it actually plays a part in everything: cancer, aging, metabolic disease, so diabetes, obesity, that goes back to cancer, heart disease, autoimmune diseases, which are rampant right now, and we have no idea how to solve them from a conventional standpoint. And even very much the mental health and psychiatric diseases that we are also on the rise, and people are struggling with. This is definitely one of the causes, right? We're, just like I said, moth to the flame. We are so obsessed with our technology that instead of using it as the tool that it can be, it is using us. All right, so what I generally talk about is light, water, and magnetism. We're going to start with water, and it's not going to be what you think. So there is a fourth phase of water. You most likely learned about 3 phases of water in school, but it's a liquid crystalline phase. Jerry Pollack, or Dr. Pollack, is a big, so there's a lot of people in the water space, but Jerry Pollack might be one of the most famous. He calls it easy water or exclusion zone water. Metabolic water, structured water. There's a lot of different names for it because it's still kind of in that time frame, with different scientists finding different things out, giving things different names in it. But most people are calling it easy water, at least at this time. Atoms are arranged in a very orderly fashion, and this is in the body, right? So this is the fourth phase of water, a crystalline phase when it's in the body, in the intracellular environment. And essentially, like when you drink a glass of water, you think that's bulk water. Easy water actually has a negative charge. It goes to pretty much lines up in any of the hydrophilic surfaces of the body. And so as you can see in this picture, that's the surface. So that's a hydrophilic surface. Exclusion water lines up where it's negatively charged. So your electrons end up against the surface, your protons line up separate from that. That's the exclusion zone. And that part is positive. And that means essentially that this water becomes a battery. And Pollack has done in the lab, has been able to take and utilize technology in which he puts a wire in the electrons and a wire in the protons and lights a light bulb. We'll get deeper into this, but that's phenomenal. So say it again. Our body is essentially a network of water, which lines itself up as a massive battery. It's full of usable potential energy. We've been taught that food is the only way we create energy, but it's not true. Your battery, your battery, that battery is made by water, which that water is made essentially in your mitochondria, which we'll talk about later, but there is a phase during the electron transfer chain that actually generates water. That water, so it's not like you drink water. I mean, some of the water that comes in obviously plays a part in the utilization and the making of water, but essentially this fourth phase is what has been generated from your mitochondria and then lines up in the intracellular environment against the hydrolytic surfaces, and then the sunlight charges it. Don't worry, we'll get into it. I'm trying to give you bits and pieces of everything, and then as we move through the program, we're going to get deeper and deeper. This is just a surface level, right? It's just the very tip of the iceberg. So effects of light in easy water. So this is part of the reason why you also have mechanisms in your body in which we draw in our light. So whether it's the sunlight outside or your light that's in your home or in your office or in your lab or wherever you're working, in your hospital, in your office building, that light that comes down and interacts with your skin and with your body is actually making biochemical changes inside of you at any given moment. And you probably have heard how infrared is really good for us. It is very, very good for us. And part of the reason it is that it builds a bigger battery and expands the size of the easy water and increases the charge of that. Ultraviolet, so after we've just lived through decades of being told to stay out of UV, and I'm not saying at any point, so if this is all you watch and then you don't work together, I'm not saying they should run around and get sunburned, but you should get exposed to UV. You should get out in the sun, and we'll talk about how to do that safely and effectively. But essentially, ultraviolet energizes the easy water. So if the infrared builds it, the ultraviolet energizes it. When it strikes it and the millions of free electrons are created, and remember we talked about how the flow of electrons is a major component to your health, and it helps to create a coherent domain of the easy water. All right, roles of easy water in health. So many more than we could even start to talk about. But we're just going to touch that. So again, it helps to energize. It helps to increase or provide energy for your intracellular processes. When you have inadequate EZ between the mitochondrial ETC, or the electron transfer chain, the proteins, it actually changes the size and the shape of the mitochondria. And this can cause inflammation. It can cause decreased energy. And remember, we talked about the flow and the health of the mitochondria, and the flow of electrons essentially are what generates health in us. Some researchers believe, so this is a very controversial, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but we're at this place where there's some research right now. And this is what's exciting about science, right? Is that it should be always evolving and changing. There really should never be, the word that has been really big over the last couple of years is settled science. And if you're truly a scientist, you should never have settled science. You should always be trying to take your hypothesis and disprove it. And then the other thing that's very unfortunate, particularly in medicine, and it's interesting because you really wouldn't see this in other industries, is that there's a huge delay, right? You wouldn't see this in tech. You wouldn't see this when it comes to your cell phones or your computers, right? But in medicine, what we see is that there's a famous quote from Planck that it's like, and I'm going to ruin it because it's not right in front of me, but it's like, medicine marches on one funeral at a time. So essentially, whoever has the most common thought process or thought leader, you have to kind of wait for them to die. There's an actual documented 17 to 20 year delay between what shows up in the literature and what shows up in standard of care, which to me is not acceptable. I think we need to evolve and this is my industry, right? I can talk about it. I'm in the middle of conventional healthcare, and we are failing on really taking our evidence and putting it faster into mainstream acceptance. But so one of the theories that's kind of being tossed out there is that maybe ATP, as you learned in your 3rd grade biology class, that maybe ATP isn't our only currency. Like, we know it's a currency of biochemical energy, but maybe there's been, Dr. Ling is one researcher that I believe is the one that did like the math, and the ATP in the human body would never be able to generate all of the biochemical changes that are necessary, and that easy water and that potential energy, that battery in the easy water, most likely it looks like right now, might be playing a big role in essentially funding the currency of energy needed for the biochemical reactions. So it's a liquid crystalline lattice, and it takes on this property where it kind of, because collagen is hydrophilic, it essentially ends up wrapping around through your entire body and ends up creating a superhighway of communication, and a communication or a way for electromagnetic frequencies to flow. And remember, we're not just biochemical, but we're electrical. Easy water from the nanotubes along the collagen is, so essentially this allows for proton and electron flow throughout the body. And this is when we start to look at the body in a very quantum way. This would be why and how we can have instant communication from one part of the body to the next. All right, so that was water. And remember, light, water, and magnetism are kind of the basis of this program. Right. And this is another, whenever I think about life, consciousness, the world, like what it means to be human, what it means to experience the human experience, I think about the fact that with light is such a good example of how our human technology can only perceive so much around us, right? So this is, you'll see, if you look at the background here, you can see the broadcast band, the radio, the microwaves, the X-rays, gamma rays, right? And that little tiny sliver of the rainbow, right? That's the only visible light we can see, but we are surrounded by the soup of other frequencies. And we tend to forget there's a lot more than we can't see or perceive. And one of the reasons that we do get sick is that over the course of the last 50 to 100 years, there's been a significant change in our internal environment for our light. So where we evolved for large periods of time outside exposed to the sunlight, and if you look up at the upper left-hand corner, the light from the sun is very balanced and mixed in its frequency. And then you'll see at sunrise and sunset, it's a cascade of colors, and as we move forward and we learn, we're going to learn that that 24-hour period is purposeful. There's a reason why that the sunrise proceeds, it cascades in a certain way, and then the light kind of cascades throughout the day and then declines throughout the later half of the day. And then if you see those lower pictures, the LED and the incandescent, that's what light bulbs currently look like. So if you think about it, that's like taking sugar from an apple and mainlining the sugar into you and not getting any of the benefits of the rest of the apple, right? That is just straight blue light. So the computer, you're watching this on, the TV, you're watching this on, right? At this moment, that is what our technology and our light bulbs are putting into us. And what is the effect that that's having on us? So light is essentially like like if you could picture it, like all these different frequencies, and they're like little little baseballs that are being thrown at us. And in our body, we have molecules that catch them like a mitt, and those are our chromophores. And this throughout in our skin, it's in our cells, it's in our like throughout our entire body, and different chromophores grab different frequencies of light. And a lot of times people are like, what? Like, this is really hard for people to wrap their heads around. Electron in an excited state gets pulled into the cellular or the nucleus, and they stimulate or cause cascades, a variety of different biochemical, hormonal, all sorts of different cascades throughout your body, depending on where the body is, what the frequency is, what the cell is that catches it. Just going back to infrared for a minute. So if infrared's coming at you, right, and the little chromophore is catching it, it's causing different things to happen in the mitochondria. So the cytochrome, the C oxidase, is a major component of the electron transfer chain, or one of the complexes. Short IR is absorbed in that, where long IR is absorbed, and we didn't get into the electron transfer chain, and we will in another lecture. But if you think about the electron transfer chain, which is essentially what makes the ATP, there's 5 complexes, right? And as it moves along, there's different purposes of the different complexes do different things. And the whole time that electron is being transferred down that chain or tunneling down that chain, protons are being forced back and forth between the inner and outer membrane of that mitochondria. The long IR, or longer frequency IR, is absorbed by the water in the heat-gated channels, ion channels. And then IR affects both your cellular redox, and then you'll hear me say a lot, you want to redox before you detox, and we'll talk even more in depth on that. But understanding how we keep the human body, redox is a major, major component to health. So IR affects cellular redox state in the mitochondria and modulates the reactive oxygen species. And a lot of people, they immediately think reactive oxygen species is inflammation, or ROS. And that is inflammation, but we're going to talk about why sometimes it's really beneficial and then actually more of a signaling compound. But it's when you have too much of it or the wrong type that it becomes a problem. And then stimulation of nitric oxide, which is a major component to this. We're going to talk a lot about it in nitric oxide also as we move forward. But it all plays a part in your cytokines, your inflammation, your growth factors, and mediating essentially the health that's coming out of your mitochondria and your electron transfer chain is so much more than just ATP. When you expose the body to infrared, and I just want to remind you, we tend to think of infrared as saunas or red panels, but also you have to remember that it's in the sun. And that's part of the reason why sunrise and sunset is so powerful, because you get a ton of infrared. You can get it all day, but particularly in the morning and in the night, because you don't have that UV glaring at you. Exposure to infrared creates a subcellular melatonin in the mitochondria. So this is interesting. We tend to think of mitochondria just as like the nighttime and helping us sleep, but it's actually an antioxidant, and that helps to scavenge excess ROS, like we just talked about, the reactive oxygen species. So when the body starts creating too much of the ROS, and then again, it is a signaling molecule, but when there's too much of it, it can wreak havoc. Melatonin helps to cool that inflammation coming from the mitochondria. To optimize this, and that also helps to optimize the spacing of those. Remember, I said there are complexes in your electron transfer chain. It helps to optimize, and essentially, you really want a tight, well controlled junction or space between those complexes, because when they're too far apart, electrons can get lost, and you want it to be more efficient. Infrared exposure along with red light, with different frequencies of red, helps again with step 4, the electron transfer chain, and helps to make the mitochondrial water, or that easy water. This is an essential part of hydration. True deep hydration comes from this water being generated appropriately from step 4, the electron transfer chain, and also how we're able to redox, or the potential of redox. Again, don't freak out. I'm telling you this stuff as kind of a step 1, and we're going to talk about this as we move forward, and I'm going to start to tie things in, but I want you to have a base of understanding, and then maybe you can even go back at times and be like, oh, this is why I'm doing that. Infrared improves ATP synthesis, and also so that 5th complex is actually a nanomotor. That is where the ATP is being, the ATP synthase is where you're actually generating that ATP. The proton comes down, this amazing little quantum like nanomotor, and pop out is ATP at the end. It's actually really amazing when you really start to think about the efficiency and the how amazing the human body is. So again, sunlight exposure, even on cloudy days, red light, panels, sauna, campfire is major. We're going to talk a lot about campfire and fire in general. Exercise, baths, cold. We need UV. We've been taught that to be fearful of the sun. So where you generally think about infrared and red being at the beginning and the end of the day, it is out all day, even on non-sunny days. But then sometime in the morning, around 8 or 9, if you're at my latitude, until the afternoon, depending also on your latitude, it will be seasonally. So right now, I'm recording this in December, so there's no UV synthesizing of things like vitamin D and such. But UV comes out in the first few hours, so usually, like I said, around 8 or 9. Those photons come from the sun and actually get trapped. Remember, we talked about chromophores. They actually get trapped in things called, and this is where it ties into mental health very much, into the aromatic amino acids, and stimulates or starts a cascade of pathways for your neurotransmitters. So everybody knows about vitamin D, and everyone thinks, oh, you got to get your sun for your vitamin D, but actually you need your vitamin D for your synthesis of your hormones, like it stimulates the tryptophan, which then will turn into serotonin and melatonin path. That's one pathway of tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin, and also your dopamine and other endorphins were actually evolutionarily conserved to be addicted to the sun. And because UVA can actually release beta endorphins, grounding and magnetism. So essentially, grounding is just connecting to the earth, taking your shoes off, putting your hands down, lying your body on the ground, grounding or earthing. And for this particular, we're going to use that as the same word. We could start to really nitpick and say that they're 2 different things, but grounding or earthing, the body is having direct contact with the natural electrical charge of the earth. When you're looking at the literature right now, there's been a handful of literature now I think we need better, higher quality studies around this, but I also on one level, but then on the other level, do we even need it? We know when we go outside and we expose ourselves to the sun, and when we put our feet on the ground or we walk on the beach, we know we feel better. And that's the irony of where we are right now. Remember I said the disconnection is a major part of dysfunction and disease? We're so disconnected from our human experience that we're looking to science to give us a paper to prove to us what we already know. Right? We know when we go outside and we take our shoes off and we put our feet in the grass, we know we feel better. But it has been shown to improve sleep. It helps to normalize the day-night cortisol. So when you wake up in the morning, you go outside and you look at the sun, you're not just entraining your circadian rhythm with the light, but when you touch the earth, you're through magnetism, your body, then your cells know the time of the day, the latitude you're standing, where you are in the season, where you are in the 24-hour day, where you are in the 365 day. And it's been shown to reduce inflammation, pain, stress. It helps to shift or balance the autonomic nervous system. So if you're too sympathetic, it will help you bring back to the parasympathetic. If you're too parasympathetic, it can help stimulate you to the sympathetic. It helps balance that. It can speed wound healing, which is one of the most amazing things, at least for our eyes to see. And there's a slide coming up. It actually reduces blood viscosity, which is so interesting. This is actually a slide that talks about that. So they've taken red blood cells and they've put it under a slide and before grounding and after grounding, and you can see the RBCs here, and you can see that you want free-flowing, spacious RBCs or red blood cells. Particularly now in this day of age, and I believe that this was even done pre-COVID, but particularly now, whether from the vaccine or the virus or anything else playing a part of it, people are having in the emergency room. I see massive issues with bleeding and clotting. There is a difference in the human body that's showing up. And grounding appears to be one of the simplest and yet most profound interventions for helping reduce cardiovascular risk, cardiovascular events, and cardiovascular and the clumping. See on the left, that is the clumping, and we'll talk about what that actually is of those RBCs. And it's because of this charge. Remember, we are electrical beings, and the zeta potential around each RBC, each red blood cell, is increased by free electrons. And if we're living in a state where we're being drained of electrons, staying indoors, being warm and all comfortable all the time, bad light exposure, poor food, and not entrained to our 24-hour, 365-day system, we tend to reduce the zeta potential. This is just an example of how grounding has. So this is a person who has a very high, difficult wound healing client. And this shows the acceleration. Now this wound is 8 months old. They could not heal it. It was under the treatment of a very particular wound clinic, so it was getting fantastic care. They were coming in and being cared for by wound nurses and a wound doctor that were all specialized in wound care. This is a diabetic, 84-year-old diabetic woman. For any of you who are familiar, healing wounds in the lower extremities of a diabetic elderly person is nearly impossible. This is so in difference to that other person was an elderly person. Oh wait, so if you can, sorry, I can't go back, but if you saw at the beginning to the end, it was a very short period of time that they started to close that wound. In contrast, this was an athlete who was actually competing in the Tour de France. So a high level international athlete. They grounded this patient after they sustained this wound, and they were able to get them back in the field within days, 2 days or something, I think. What is the Schumann resonance? As a vibrating electromagnetic field, right? It is. That picture, remember back at the beginning, that surrounds the Earth. This is, if you look at it with hertz, or you want to measure it, it's 7.83. Music and sounds of that 7.83 are incredible healing to us. So if you were like, and unfortunately, a lot of music and a lot of advertisement and things that are played in the general media are purposefully altered to create anxiety and distortion, where bringing or listening to music that has a 7.83 hertz can actually bring us back into this heartbeat of the earth. And it does fluctuate. We could get a lot deeper into that, and we will talk a lot deeper into it because there's something else other than the Schumann resonance, but then there's also the Carnegie curve. So when you make contact with the earth, you are not only getting this electromagnetic impulse from the earth, letting you know your latitude, your season, and like your connection to that earth and your connection. It's part of the reason why it's incredibly grounding and integrative for your nervous system when you put your feet or your hands or your body on the earth. And then the Carnegie curve is a 24-hour. So your Schumann resonance is like your heartbeat, it's continuous. And then your Carnegie curve, which you're also getting from that geomagnetic impulse, is your 24-hour day rhythm. All right, so cold. Cold is a big technique that I use. We live in this world where we evolved with a winter and a summer, we evolved with a day and a night. Winter and a summer is very important. It's important for us at times to be cold. It's important for us at times to be hot. We should not be at that like 70-degree climate controlled all of the time. We are meant to thrive in extreme conditions. Cold thermogenesis allows us to access that deep wisdom that spent thousands and millions of years as we were evolving in winter. Benefits of cold, again, we need more studies, but there's been more and more studies on this, and we've found out where we used to try to spend an excessive amount of time getting cold, really what we need is about 11 minutes a week. And for the girls that are listening to this, especially if you're cycling, we will talk about your cycle and whether or not and when the best part of the month is for you to be getting cold. And in general, we're going to talk about cold isn't for everybody. It isn't for all of us all the time, but it's a very, very, very powerful tool. It can help reduce muscle soreness. It boosts your immune system. It gives you so much norepi and dopamine. It's incredibly good for your neurochemistry. It improves your mood. I truly believe that you can actually utilize this as a major tool for mental illness. Treatment of chronic autoimmune inflammation, weight loss, improved depression, improved lipid metabolism, improved glucose. And it goes so much deeper than this, and we'll talk about it. Cold the brain. The brain releases neuroepi, right? Neuroepi is such an important neurochemistry. Everybody always talks about serotonin and dopamine, but neuroepi is a major player too. And during the stress, and this is the other thing we're going to talk about cold, is hormesis, or a dose-dependent amount of stress. And when we do this in a controlled environment, and we teach our body that it's safe to get cold, to be uncomfortable, and we breathe through that in the right way. And I teach cold very different than a lot of people do cold. But you're actually broadening that window of your ability to handle stress, and you're teaching yourself resilience. But also it's been shown to decrease depression, anxiety. It can increase your heart rate variability, which is a tool that we'll probably use, which is we're looking at the space between, if you think about like boom, 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 boom. And if any of you who are medical, you picture that what you see on an EKG, it's the R to R variability that we're looking at. And the higher your heart rate variability, the healthier your nervous system. Remember, everything's linked. Mood and brain function can improve. You can help to stimulate the vagus nerve physiologically. You can help modulate your hormones, your neurochemistry. It increases autophagy, fatty acid oxidation. It increases the brown fat in your body. Increases your mitochondrial turnover, thermogenesis. Oh yeah, in that brown tissue, and you're also increasing your brown tissue. You're increasing your NAD. Your mitochondria biogenesis, which is the creation of more mitochondria. Browning of the white fat, and cold shock proteins. So part of the magic is in how we're warming up. So if we're particularly using this for weight loss, it's very important to allow you always want to end on cold. So especially if, say, you're going to do some sauna and some cold, you would want to actually allow yourself to end on cold, so that you're actually allowing yourself to warm up. When we get cold, we shiver to warm, but also we have cold non-shiver thermogenesis, which is occurring again in the mitochondria and creating infrared light, which is absolutely amazing and helping to structure our easy water. And it also helps to decrease the space between the electron transfer chain proteins. So see how it's all tying together? This is the bat, and then it put out a bat, and I thought it was cute, so I kept it. But mitochondria health is a story of energy flow. So your bat, or your brown adipose tissue, actually starts to, and we're not going to get into this here, but there's this thing where it uncouples and it creates, so it actually, when the proteins are going from the inner to outer membranes and moving along the electron transfer chain, essentially there's an uncoupling that happens. It creates warmth and light inside of the body. So you're essentially kind of creating what you would get from an infrared coming into the body. You're creating infrared out of the body. It's pretty cool. So we just talked about all of this as well, just that how important the brown adipose tissue is. Also finding out more and more about brown adipose tissue and how it actually has a circadian balancing effect, hormonal effect. It's metabolically efficient and effective. So cold can increase the amount of sauna of your mitochondria, and sauna increases the efficiency of your mitochondria. Disruption plus dysfunction equals disease. And I would say disconnection equals disease. So recap: low cellular voltage, or that not having enough of that easy water, being dehydrated from that true intercellular water, is not only dehydrating, but also lowers our cellular voltage. And if we go back to the concept that maybe it's not just ATP, our cellular voltage is very, very important in our ability to stay healthy. Low oxygen to the mitochondria. So we didn't even talk about breath, but we will. But being able to make sure that the appropriate oxygen is getting to the mitochondria. Anything that reduces oxygen delivery to the mitochondria for short periods of time can be really beneficial, and then helping the body. So we're not even going to tap into this yet, because this is a little bit more of an advance. I didn't realize I put it in there, but we will be playing with how important oxygen is to the mitochondria. Reducing electron flow through mitochondria is a massive cause of disease. So these are, what is the recap of disease, right? So your low cellular voltage causes disease. Low oxygen flow to the mitochondria causes disease. Reduced electron flow throughout the mitochondria causes disease. And excess of reactive oxygen or reactive nitrogen species causes disease. How to reestablish health. So this is how we apply this to everyday life. Circadian balance. So re-entraining yourself to the 24-hour light day rhythms, whole real food, sunlight exposure with purpose. Red light therapy is a good tool, but not necessary, because you can get it from the sun. Cold and hot, tools. Grounding, absolute foundational. You need to be getting your feet and your body exposed to both the sun and the earth every single day. Indoor light management, seasonal ketosis for some people, migrating or mitigating your non-EMFs, which destroy the easy water. Deuterium regulation, we didn't even touch on deuterium. We will. And obviously movement. And I would add on to this relationship and connections with humans and animals. And that is the end of today. I know that was so much information. So much information. Your head's probably spinning. But I wanted you to have this basis of information, so then as we move forward, I can relay back and say, okay, remember we talked about X, Y, and Z. This is why we're implementing this into your life. So maybe you absorbed this, maybe you didn't. You get to keep this. So at any point you get to go back to this. And at any point I may pull it up. And in fact, in your first or throughout your follow-ups or your initial visit, I probably will pull it up and say, let's look at this. This is why we're doing this. And we'll go a little deeper into each piece. And as we move forward through the weeks and through the months, we will get deeper and deeper into these concepts. But remember, the basic thing, just always going back to the basics. And I look forward to working with you. Thank you.